My name is Russ Sajovi. I'm a mechanical engineer, and these are my watches.
Well, Russ, thank you very much for doing this. Really appreciate it. To kick things off, though, mechanical engineer. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and how that all kind of connects here to watches.
Yeah, so mechanical engineering, I guess, has a pretty broad definition.
Sure.
What I do is not necessarily what a lot of others do. So I did design work when I was in college, decided I didn't want to have a desk job, typical 9 to 5. So I actually work as an outside sales / application engineer. I work for a company that represents power transmission manufacturers, and I'll be out in steel mills, in ethanol plants, in a lot of other heavy industries, as well as OEMs that use power transmission products, and I help spec out those products for their requirements.
Do you have like a general genre of watch that you typically like? What's like your philosophy of collecting? And as an engineer, I want to ask this too, because there's so much of a tie-in to mechanical, watchmaking, and then you have mechanical engineer. I could see why there's a connection, but what interests you about acquiring a watch specifically based on what your background is?
Yeah, so I really gravitate toward mechanical watches for the most part.
Sure.
I like the amount of complexity that goes into them, and the fact that someone's able to cram so much, especially with complications, into such a small package. I tend to gravitate toward watches that at least have some water resistance. Screw down crown is kind of what I look for, sapphire crystal. That way if I ding it up, it's not as noticeable. And I just think the ruggedness of some of the dive watches as well is kind of what I gravitate toward. I actually do use the timing bezel quite often on my Tudor and some of my other dive watches. And I think a lot of people probably don't use the functionality of it, but like to play with the clicks, and if nothing else.
Yes, my expensive fidget spinner is what I always like to say when I use it, sitting at the desk. But you mentioned all these things about really robust watches, but I'm looking over here at the left to start, and you have these vintage pieces, which way more delicate than what you just described, but it seems like they're very important pieces. Maybe we start here on the left with this Hamilton. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Yeah,
so the first watch I wanted to show you was this Hamilton that was owned by my grandfather. I don't honestly recall him wearing it much, but he was definitely an inspiration for me to get into the field of engineering and pursue STEM courses. When I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time with my grandparents, and specifically my grandpa. I would help him outside a lot in the yard. He would show me how to fix, whether it was his tractor or work on the car, and he was really a big part of me making the decision to get into mechanical engineering.
And then the watch itself too. I mean, it's signed, engraved on the case back. How did he come to acquire this piece?
So this was actually given to him by his employer, which at the time was Tow Motor. He worked there before World War II broke out. So they actually delayed his enlistment until February of 1944 because they liked him so much. Mm-hmm. And he ended up going back to the company after he got out, back from Europe after the war was over. And this was for 1941 to 1951.
So 10 years of service with the company.
Yep, 10 years. And after that, he actually ended up working for Caterpillar when they acquired Tow Motor later on, and then he worked there until retirement in the 80s.
But that's amazing. You have a connection, you have the watch, then you also have really your career path, being paved probably by your grandfather in some ways here in Cleveland, and the fact that that's a way to connect all the dots is amazing. Another watch that is important, I believe, to your family is the Seiko next to it, correct?
Yeah. So this is kind of a similar situation actually to the Hamilton. My dad stopped over randomly on a weekday when I was working from home and dropped off this and a couple of other watches, and just kind of wanted to see if I can maybe get it running right and get some things fixed on it. My mom actually gifted this to him when they were pretty early in their relationship in the 80s, and she did engrave the case back as well.
It's a cool piece. I like the crystal as well in terms of how it has like that multifaceted look.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of my favorite parts is that like polygonal faceted crystal. Unfortunately, there's a crack in it. It's kind of difficult to try to source the exact crystal to get it repaired, but I'll try to find it at some point and get it back into shape so my dad can wear it again.
That's amazing. Oh, a little spoiler for your dad out there that he might have something coming in his future, but that's all good. So now moving along, so we're heading over to, we went from Seiko, but now we're going to Grand Seiko. So this is a watch that you personally acquired.
Yep.
And was one that was very important in your collecting journey. So why did you decide on the Snowflake, and why were you drawn to Grand Seiko?
So initially, I actually think I heard of Grand Seiko from Matt Farah
Sure, yeah,
on a podcast.
Yeah,
he was talking about the level of finishing and how it's kind of an underrated brand. I was always drawn to the Snowflake. I thought the dial texture was my favorite of the traditional heritage series that they've been producing for a while. The finishing's great. I actually ended up going to Las Vegas a few years back, and at the time we didn't have a Grand Seiko boutique in the area, and being from Cleveland. So I stopped at Watches of Switzerland, and I was taking a look at this, and I just kind of decided that on this, it was actually my first, I would say, luxury watch purchase that I made. Just like the versatility of it, and I do typically wear it on either this NATO strap, which is actually a Seiko strap that I believe came with some of their diving Prospects dive models, but I also do use the bracelet quite often as well.
And then what fascinates you, I mean, as an engineer, I have to ask, like when you were learning about spring drive, like was that like a point of fascination even further into wanting to take the dive into Grand Seiko?
Yeah, so actually I think it was one of your videos I initially saw that kind of explained how spring drive worked, and just the accuracy you're able to get out of a mechanical power generation, yet still using the quartz oscillator to regulate the time, and getting rid of some of the friction by not having components oscillating back and forth, but rather just traveling in one direction. Just, it was pretty cool to me, so.
Yeah, I'm far from an engineer, but I was mostly in the humanities building in my time in education, but still, even that was enough to, with spring drive, fascinate me to really learn a little bit more about this. And as you're mentioning, it has the great middle ground of having the endless supply that comes from a mainspring and winding up for your own wear, and then also having like the frictionless break that can happen, so you have the no friction on the movement, as well as making sure that you have an accurate movement. So it's amazing, and I love hearing just from an engineer, like the perspective and like why you were drawn to that. It makes perfect sense why you would be though.
And the perfect sweep, it just looks nice.
So this next piece on the table, I want to talk about this because if I'm not mistaken, you also fly, you're a pilot as well, and this was a watch that you bought as maybe a way to celebrate that new milestone in your life, right?
Yep, so a few years ago, I just decided, I've always kind of wanted to get my pilot's license, and I've always flirted with the idea, and just decided to kind of go for it about 3 years ago. I've always had an interest in aviation. I've always really enjoyed, especially military aviation, and some of the history behind it, but I just was always drawn to flying. I guess I was in Put-in-Bay, and I was actually watching some of the planes take off and land at the small airport out on the island, and just kind of thought, there's no better time than now to just try it.
So you're probably just drinking a few beers and just looking up at the skies, because Put-in-Bay is in the middle of basically inland from Lake Erie.
Yep.
In Lake Erie. So you're usually having a good time out there, but you're just seeing these planes going by, and that was it. Just simply that.
Had a few too many drinks the night before. Biked over to the airport to try to kind of get rid of a hangover, and sitting there watching planes in the sun really kind of inspired me to just take that step and try something I've always wanted to do. It took me about a year and a half, 2 years to actually get my license, and right around that time, I decided to order this to kind of commemorate that achievement, I guess, in my life. And I actually had the rotor on the rear also engraved. It says blue skies, which is kind of a greeting, part of a greeting, I guess, that pilots will tell one another. Good blue skies and tailwinds is what they often will say, just as a kind of a good luck memento when you see each other.
So I am not surprised to see this watch here, because I was actually in the store when you decided to buy it. This is your Omega Seamaster 300. So tell us a little bit more about this and why you love it.
Yeah, so the 75th anniversary of the Seamaster, I really was drawn to the collection because they were a little bit more colorful than a lot of the other options in that Seamaster family. I guess I was drawn to the Seamaster 300 vintage due to the proportions of it and the 60s era styling. It's kind of goes back to the Submariner and some of the other competitors from that time. I also like the dial gradient and the sandwich dial construction on this model specifically, as well as the color lume. I just thought it really looked cool. And I liked some of the modern features of it. Obviously the new coaxial escapement, as well as just the ceramic bezel, sapphire crystal. It allows it to be a little bit more durable, so I can wear this out if I go to a Guardians game or something in the summer. It's a fun, bright watch that really fits the bill for for summer.
What I really liked about this one too is because you were talking about all these like vintage elements of this watch. I mean, looking back to the original trilogy models of 1957, but then you have this modernity with the design, with the blue accents. You have the 8900 movement, which I think is an amazing caliber, especially with the no date, where you have the isolated hour function at that first point, or the second point, I should say. It's a very complete watch, and it's this like beautiful dichotomy of those two ideas. You have the past that's here, but you also have the present.
Yeah, and it makes a great travel watch too. It's fun for vacations if you're in a hot area, or if you're on the beach. And like you said, the skip hour functionality basically makes it like a GMT watch without the second hour hand.
So now we transition over to the Seiko model here, and this is a little bit of a change of pace from the vintage Seiko that we saw earlier. So what do we have here?
So that's one of the Cocktail Time series. I believe this one is the Cocktail Time Toasted Matcha model.
Yeah, they did the green dial for the US market. Is this a JDM?
This is a JDM. I ordered this one off of eBay.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so I really like the dial texture in photos. I never actually got to see this one in person, which is kind of uncharacteristic of what I normally do with watch shopping. But all the photos look nice, and to be honest, the Seikos are within a price range. Even if you don't like it, you didn't spend a ton of money on it, so they're still very affordable.
I mean, that dial's spectacular too. And then this is the 38.5 millimeter case, right?
Correct.
This one?
Yep.
So a little bit more wearable, but you just found it online one day and just really interested in it?
Yeah, I think I saw a review maybe on this model, and I really liked some of the shots in the different lighting conditions of the dial. It really popped, and I just like that they also use hard wax crystal, so it's somewhat scratch resistant. It's not quite as good as some of the others, but for a dress watch, it kind of looks a little bit nicer. You could dress it up and
really
kind of get me into that.
For sure. So on the far right, this is a watch brand I am actually not familiar with at all. So if you could tell me a little bit more about it and then how you came to acquire it.
Yeah, so this is a Camden. I believe it's a model 88. I was actually visiting my sister in London. She lives in the suburbs. This was probably right when I got out of high school. And at the time, I was not that into watches. We were actually visiting Borough Market, which is kind of a farmer's market. They have a lot of different food and pastry shops, those kind of things. But they did have this watch boutique in the corner called Camden. And I was just kind of drawn to the simplicity of the dial. And although this probably isn't one of the watches I wear the most, I still keep it in the collection because it reminds me of the first time I went to go visit her when she moved out there. And it makes me think of my sister when I see it, when I wear it.
And then to close things out, you have something on your wrist here. So a watch from Tudor. I'm assuming that this is something you wear a lot since that was what you decided to wear for the shoot. But tell us more about the Tudor FXD you have.
Yeah, so the FXD, I actually bought just kind of on a spur of the moment. I guess I should say I just walked into a local AD and they happened to have one of these sitting in the shelf. I honestly did not know what it was at the time. Picked it up, took a look at it, realized how light it was, and I like the idea that the lugs are built into the case, so you really can't lose this watch. Also, just from wearing it, the sapphire crystal, the ceramic bezel insert, and the titanium really hides scratch as well, and nicks. And I have bumped this into quite a few things, and it's still running really accurately. And also, you can't really tell, that there's any damage.
So you wear that one pretty regularly? Is that like mostly your like in the field, like day-to-day type of watch?
Yeah, this is one I can not worry about getting wet. If it gets dirty, I can just wash it off when I get home. I also really like the kind of vintage throwback of the red Pelagos text. And it kind of, at least when I look back at some of the older Submariner models.
Yeah, something like the red sub, sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always love how like this watch, I mean, it's 42 millimeters, so it's not a small watch, but the way the fixed lugs works with the pull-through straps, like it does not wear like that. It's kind of a mystery into how it's able to work on your wrist when you put it on for the first time. So I understand, even without intention of going into a store and trying it on, like why you might walk out with it.
Yeah, it's probably been my most worn watch since I purchased it, and there's really nothing bad I can say about it. It's on the larger size of what I think I can get away with my wrist size, and the thin case of the FXD compared to the regular Pelagos also helps, I think, hide the size of it.
Cool. Well, Russ, thank you very much. I always like talking with people that have different interesting backgrounds, and one of the most obvious probably occupations that you could have and being interested in watches is mechanical engineering. So thank you for giving us a window into your collection and a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Glad I got to show you the watches.
Absolutely.